Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello, and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we talk about leadership, communication, authenticity, and how to show up to get the recognition that you deserve. Before we get started on the interview today, I'd like to invite you to see where your skills are strong by taking our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your skills are strong and where perhaps a little bit of support could help you get the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. My guest today is Janet Miller Evans. She's a well-known coach in the San Francisco Bay Area. We've known each other for several years, and I was really excited to have her on the show today. She is the founder and CEO of Entevos LLC, she's a certified coach known for establishing rapid rapport, building trust and assurance. Janet guides her clients to reimagine their current thinking, increase authenticity, and achieve peak performance. She provides coaching services to executives, leaders, and teams for businesses, educational, and nonprofit organizations. She's also a facilitator, moderator, and public speaker. Janet's coachees have lived in 46 countries. Her career progressed through government utility industry and companies in healthcare, logistics, IT, internet, and telecommunication. She's held various leadership roles with Fortune 50 companies, including FedEx, IBM, UPS, and Comcast. She has led teams up to 150 employees, attained sales revenue goals of $450 million, and managed multi-million-dollar profit and loss initiatives. Best of all, Janet's mantra for life is amplified in the Latin meaning of the company name. Ente, being, and vos is you. So Entevos, being you. On to the interview with Janet Miller Evans. Janet Miller Evans, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Elizabeth.
Well, I'm glad to have you. We've known each other for several years, and you've always been on my wish list, so I'm glad it worked out this time. Before I get into the various questions I have for you, let me ask you, who would be your dream interview? If you could interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Elizabeth, my dream interview would probably be with Eleanor Roosevelt.
Ooh, good. Okay.
And the reason that it would be with Eleanor Roosevelt is because of her resilience and her ability to communicate what she thought was important, stand by her beliefs with human dignity, and actually get things done.
Getting things done. That's important. Yes. And standing by. I'm sure she didn't think she was going to wind up helping run the country. That probably wasn't her plan as a young girl. So yeah, just step in when needed.
Absolutely. She was able to pivot. So if she didn't think that she was going to run the country, when the opportunity came, she answered the opportunity with yes, and she just moved forward and did what she needed to do. And then as she realized her power, she stepped into it. She didn't shy away from it. She didn't fall on that old thing that we sometimes fall into is, I have imposter syndrome. She said, no, I'm going to stand up for who I am, and I'm okay with that. And those who want to come along, that's great. Those who don't, I won't let them hold me back.
Oh,
And
what a
that's
great.
when I read about her, that's what I really admire.
I love that. I love that. Well, that actually brings me to the first question I was going to ask you about. Eleanor Roosevelt was her own authentic self. And you talk a lot about authenticity. And, we often hear, well, you just need to know your value. But how? I mean, that sounds like easy to say and not so easy to do. How do you help people know their value?
That's a really good question. I think the first thing in knowing your value is being self aware,
Mm-hmm.
understanding what you do value, when it shows up, how does that feel for you? And when you're in situations, do the values that you've outlined show up in those situations? And that's what lets you know whether to move forward or whether to say, I may need to go a different direction.
Oh, actually brings me to another thing. We hear a lot. You should be self-aware. I'm sure there are people who are oblivious to what's going around. We would think they're not self-aware, but they think they're self-aware. So how do you know you're self-aware? Do you have any practices that we could follow to increase our self-awareness? And actually the self-awareness multiple in multiple ways. I mean, there are many parts of our lives where we could be more or less self-aware.
That's very true, Elizabeth. And of course, I'm a coach. So
Yeah.
this is
Well,
an
this is why I'm
unabashed
asking you. I
report
know
for
you do
coaches.
this. So yeah, so
Right.
please help.
So I would suggest if you feel that you are not really understanding and aren't able to determine your own self awareness, working with someone, such as a coach, can help you with that.
Mhm.
There are assessments out there, and there are many of them. And assessments are based, I suggest getting one and asking, is it neuroscience based? And all that means is there is documented evidence and supported data for the information that they're providing you. So that means that you can at least have some high percentage of reassurance that the feedback that you're getting is real, is
Mhm.
data based on human behavior, not just on someone's whim or someone who stuck a finger in the air and said, okay, I'm going to give an assessment. But the other thing about assessments is only data because they're about a point in time and they're about how you view things at that time. And of course, we all change. But we need those assessments to give us some basis or to begin the discussion or to begin to see areas of which we do excel or that we do have opportunity or that we do demonstrate strong value. Also, now from that, seeking feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Feedback is a gift. It is more data. It is a point in time. It is how that person sees you in their mirror at that time. So you take that with understanding, while this is who I think I am, this is how I'm showing up to this group of people. And you want to get feedback from more than one person because everybody has an opinion. Not to sit in it and to make judgment of you being good or bad, but hey, this is how I'm showing up. And what you're looking for when you hear this feedback are patterns. Are several people saying the same thing? Are different people saying different things? Then you know within those groups, this is how I'm showing up. And then with the feedback, again, you take it as data, neither good or bad, just information to help you understand who you are and how you want to show up and how to regulate your actions, emotions, and behaviors in situations. So those are a couple of things. And then also practicing self compassion.
Ah.
I have a saying, I don't know who I got this from, so I'm going to have to say anonymous, but I love it. Be gentle with us, mere mortal.
Ah, right. Yes, we're all
And then
human.
understanding you are
Yeah.
one. So
Yeah.
being compassionate with yourself, giving yourself some grace,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing life is a continuous growth cycle and you're growing until you leave this earth. So it's always something to learn. It's always something to do. There may be a day where you make a mistake. You pick yourself up, you shake yourself off, you learn from it.
You apologize. Yes. You made a mistake that hurt somebody. Yes.
If you hurt somebody, right.
Yeah.
But even in that, Elizabeth, recognizing when is it appropriate to apologize.
Ah,
Sometimes we say, I'm sorry all the time for no reason. So think
yes.
about it. Before we apologize, is this a situation where I inflicted pain, unintentionally hurt someone, or someone misunderstood my either intent, my action, and I want to apologize for that? But again, being very self aware and intentional with grace on when we apologize.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was gonna ask you about is that what if the feedback is not so helpful? What if it's somebody's opinion that you think actually they're wrong? If it's unqualified person is someone's telling you how to do something when they really don't know what they're talking about.
Now, is that a fact or is that a judgment that we're making? So
Ah, okay. Okay, good point. Yes.
I would say think about that. And then think about, again, as I said in feedback, it's the mirror from which they see it. And it's just
Okay.
like, as you were talking, trying to come up with an analogy, I came with the food analogy.
Mhm.
Some people like chocolate. Some people can tolerate it. Some people cannot. Everything is not for you. So when you get that feedback, again, that's where your judgment, your discernment, and your choice comes in on what you do with that.
Mhm.
Just because they gave it doesn't mean that you have to receive it. But again, in self-awareness, you want to think about, are there some patterns showing up? When I received that feedback, did I get this feeling inside of me that said, that hit a nerve? Your body will tell you
Uh-huh.
whether it's real or not real. So listening for those signs. And that's one other point you mentioned about being authentic. Being
Being still,
to
meaning
actually in the quiet,
being
to
still.
actually still. Yes.
Yes.
That's my southern. I'm southern still.
Okay. So STILL, you mean?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was thinking tempered steel like a sword or something.
exactly. I was mean being those quiet moments where you actually can reflect, where you
Mhm.
actually can hear what was being said and
Mhm.
reflecting in your mind, being honest with yourself about what you heard,
Mhm.
about how you're feeling, about your own action. This really it really is about.
Your metaphor back there about some people don't like chocolate. Some people like chocolate, some people don't like chocolate, and some people can't eat it. I actually know people who can't eat chocolate, but my first instant reaction was, how could anybody not like chocolate? And that's just like a biased statement. I realized I went, oh, wow, this is like
Exactly.
the people who don't understand what it's like to be different. And they say,
Exactly.
so how come this is a problem? Because it's never been a problem for them. So,
Very good
okay,
point.
having chocolates, I love chocolate and it doesn't, but I know people who react badly to it.
Mhm,
So that's a difference in my assumptions. I
mhm,
noticed myself reacting.
mhm.
Let's go back to asking for feedback without apologizing in advance. What's a good way of asking for feedback? Yeah, what's a good way of asking for feedback?
What do you think, Elizabeth? I am having this situation, and this is how I thought that I reacted or I came across. What do you think?
Hmm.
Elizabeth, in my behaviors, I'm just trying to get a pulse on how others perceive me. When I'm interacting or making a speech or talking in front of a group or giving one on one feedback to you, what do you see?
Mm-hmm.
You ask from a point of inquiry, you ask from a point of being open to receive, and
Mm-hmm.
you ask from a point of gratitude, thankful that they will tell you the truth. Because a lot of times people don't want to give feedback because they don't want to be perceived as hurting someone's feelings. Or it's very hard for them to tell that truth if it's not in their own, we talked about, in their own judgment, good or positive or nice.
Mm-hmm. And then don't
When
justify yourself.
we apologize for so many things that we don't need to apologize for. I heard you say a minute ago, apologize in advance.
Yeah.
what came to my mind is move someone to apologize in advance. There's nothing to apologize for. So what are you?
Uh-huh.
That's very interesting.
I think it's something that women especially are trained to do. It's the whole sorry habit. Um, I did a whole broadcast on this a while ago sorry, but could I ask a question? Sorry, but I have an idea that in the meeting, making a point in a meeting and starting out by saying sorry, which immediately depositions you in a kind of an unconscious way. So it weakens you and it weakens what you have to say if you apologize for it before actually submitting a legitimate idea.
Absolutely. It came to mind, and I don't know who did this song, but it was a song called Sorry, Not Sorry. Because
Yeah.
that's what happens when you apologize in advance. You're sorry, but you're really not sorry because there was nothing for you to be sorry for.
Which means it has no meaning. Yeah.
Which is about sayings like that for me. Somewhere I learned, Elizabeth, when you thank someone, thank them with what it is you're thanking them for. So when you're saying, I'm sorry, think about and saying, I'm sorry for. And when you think about what that for is, if there's nothing to follow the for, then you don't need to apologize.
Uh-huh. I often try to say, if I've missed a deadline, or things got busy and I didn't respond to someone, I will say my apologies rather than saying I'm sorry. Just because it feels like sorry is a word that has lost its power, if you will, lost its meaning to truly say, I know I promised to get this letter to you by the end of last week. My apologies. Things got crazy and I just didn't get to it. It's my way of trying not to say sorry so much because I used to do that all the time. And then people didn't take me seriously.
Right.
Let's thinking about not being taken seriously or, microaggressions. It's another thing that I've heard you talk about. And, microaggressions are really common in the workplace. I don't know who started calling them that, but I think it's a very good phrase. Most of the time, we just smile and swallow our anger if we're angry at something. And then many people then stew about it. When is it appropriate to push back? Or when is it appropriate to say something when it might be dangerous to do so? Does that make sense?
If I can break that into two parts, when is it
Yes,
appropriate to say
it is
something?
two parts, yes.
When is it appropriate to say something? When you believe that it is something that really is offensive to you, in my opinion,
Mhm.
then it may be appropriate for you to say something. If it is of no consequence to you and you really can just move forward and roll with it, then you may just want to do that. It is important to understand that when things are said to us, it is not always about us. And sometimes we don't know what the intent was or where it's coming from. So,
Mhm.
with that being said, I would say remain even if you can. Don't react immediately. Think about it, assuming that there was good intention. But when you know there may not be, the appropriate thing to do, in my opinion, is to have that discussion calmly and in the right setting. Sometimes it can happen immediately. Other
Mhm.
times you need to circle back and say, a couple of days ago when we were talking about X, I really thought about that and I wanted to share with you what my reaction was. So what my thought was when you said that to me and wanted to give you another perspective. And then ask permission. May I share my thoughts with you?
Mhm.
And what that is to frame the conversation, to put it on an even keel and to take some of the emotion out or the assumptions out that could lead to a misunderstanding.
Mhm. When I think about the jokes we used to tell that were so politically incorrect and, the jokes I used to know as a kid and thinking about it now and thinking, I can't believe we said that. It is, I guess sometimes it's How can you make another person aware that what they're saying is hurtful or putting you, if there's someone who's constantly putting you down, for
Hmm.
instance, interrupting, not letting
Hmm.
you finish your thought,
Hmm.
interrupting, jumping in, or stealing your idea. Do you have thoughts? I mean, that's a microaggression. It's often an unconscious microaggression. Do you have any thoughts about how best to respond to something like that, behavior like that? Yeah.
And I tend to do that a lot in terms of I had a habit of speaking when someone else is speaking because I can't sometimes uh, navigate when their pause is coming.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to, that's a situation where I tend to will say, I did not mean to step on you. Please finish. If someone is doing that to you all the time, one of the things I'm learning to do is, and I'm practicing every day, is pausing and letting them have the floor for as long as they need it. So that when I begin to speak, what I've noticed is they have realized I have been talking for the last 2 minutes. So I'll let her finish. And that takes practice, but that's one of the things that I'm trying to do. And I would suggest is to think about your own power of the pause
Mm-hmm.
and your own way to be actively listening so that when it's your turn, the other person will model that behavior. It's funny how humans model each other.
Now, I've worked with colleagues who constantly jump in and finish the sentence they think I'm going to say, and or talk over me. I've had colleagues who've done that.
So many things there. Again, Elizabeth, the person who is jumping in when they finish, I appreciate your point. Here's another way of looking at it, or here's what I was thinking, and just go right on. If
Mm.
they do that, you might want to pull them aside one on one and just have the conversation. Stealing your thought. That conversation came up with a group of women for me the other day. And some of the suggestions and the feedback was politely saying, yes, and to that person's point. Yes, that thought was exactly what I was going to say. I would have framed it just slightly differently and go on and make your point.
Mm-hmm.
Stewing about them stealing your points is just not going to be helpful for you because you will find that it will happen to you repeatedly. It is what people do. I have found I've had 30 years of experience in the business world, and people will try to take your ideas. As a woman, and I hear it quite a bit, oh, I said that, and this other person will jump in and say the exact same thing I said and get credit for it. Most times they say it's men doing that, but some women who get the floor and who are able to assert themselves will
Mm-hmm.
do that as well. So I'm not going to say it's just a man trait, maybe a greater percentage of men, but people do that to each other all the time. And the thing that I've learned, again, some suggestions is to politely say, your point was well taken. I made that point a few minutes ago, or I just made that point, and I'm glad you agree with me. But
Mm-hmm.
again, you want to get across that you have made your point and the fact that they're adding to. So turning it into a positive.
Ah.
Again, all of these things you want to weigh because there is some cost because people are going to make judgments. So you want to weigh that about with how you come across normally, how you want to be perceived. If you want to start practicing it, start practicing it. It's never too late. But again, knowing that these things are going to happen, being prepared mentally, and it's mental gymnastics of saying, I am going to be calm about this. I am going to assume good intentions. I am going to educate where needed. And if someone is totally off base, I'm going to speak with them one on one and have them agree on what our boundaries should be.
Well, you're more generous than I am because a lot of the work I do is with women who aren't hurt. When somebody steals their idea, male or female, my solution is to recruit an ally. If this is a common pattern, recruit an ally or two to say, hey, when that person interrupts me or says my idea 5 minutes later, will you just say, great, that's lovely. That's what Elizabeth just did. Or thank you for expanding on Elizabeth's idea, rather than claiming credit for something. I often feel it's because they're not really listening. So when they have a great idea, it's because subconsciously they've heard you, but they're not really listening. So they think it's their idea. I've heard
That's
that
assuming good
over and
intent.
over.
That's assuming good intent, Elizabeth. And that does happen. A lot of times people will just steal the idea.
Yes, that
And
too.
your suggestion is very good. A lot of times women find themselves the only person in the room, and getting a male ally to do that for you, that would be wonderful. Generally, that would be wonderful. And I'm being positive there too, but just to find that ally in those settings that would be able to do that would be a wonderful thing. Because if you notice what men do and what women leaders have learned to do, and you see it all the time, all the time. If you're watching TV and you watch politics and those things, you'll find that or not even politics, but the CEOs or leaders of organizations, whenever they're giving speeches or talking about something, they are either telling a story and bringing some other people in, or either they're validating somebody with their words. So the more you can get that ally to validate with your words, giving you credibility and pumping you up so that when it is time for you to speak, others actually will listen. That's
Yes.
another good way to do.
Well, it's a way of training your listeners to pay attention to you by sometimes third-party endorsement is, if they're not going to listen to you, then who do they listen to? And have that person ask that person to back you up until they're used to listening to you.
Absolutely.
And then if you have an idea, say it in a concise and compelling way. Don't ramble on and on and on, because that's another reason why people interrupt. Keep
When all
going.
these things that happen, I'll close with pick your battle. Because again, sometimes
Pick your battles.
Yes. Sometimes we don't know the intent. And sometimes we can perceive, because we're in this state of defensiveness or state of somebody just stepped on what I just said, that we can respond without really thinking about how big of a deal is this really to me, and what will it cost me, if anything.
Well, I also think that in some ways it's two ways of working with people. Is there's a whole section of people who've learned to process ideas by challenging them. You know, that's to say, if I challenge you, can you defend that idea? Whereas other people will react as if it's a personal challenge, and you're challenging my idea. That means you're challenging me. Those seem to be the relational thinkers who relate everything, think of it as meaning them, rather than a challenge which you are expected to defend and prove that you can do it. If you know that, if you recognize that could be what's going on, it's worth having a conversation about it. I find a lot of people, those who thrive on tossing ideas back and forth and challenging each other, don't understand the ones who actually have to think about it before they can produce their idea. Take a little time. So anyway, this are just observations from working people. Janet, this has been really wonderful to have you on the show. If somebody's listening and they're thinking about self-awareness and authenticity and how to be authentic, and we have to be self-aware in order to be authentic, where could we start? What's one thing our listeners could do as soon as this podcast finishes?
I would say begin by making a list of who you think you are.
Okay.
Understanding what your preferences are, understanding what your skills are, understanding what your values are, understanding how you show up in situations. So when somebody steps on you, what do you do right now? When somebody steals your idea, what do you do right now? And what I'm asking is not what you, in order to remedy it, I'm asking, what are you doing right now? Do you get offended? Does it make your stomach hurt? Do you get a migraine? Do you speak up immediately? Have you been known to just blurt out, why did you steal my idea? So I'm saying self-aware is first understanding who you are, what you do in those situations. So I would start by saying, just getting a little diary and start writing down, these are my preferences of things. These are my skills. That's how I would start.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
And the next thing I would do, flip to another page, halfway in the book, and start celebrating myself. Celebrating when you have achieved something. Celebrating when you've held back, and you know you've held back from that temptation to interrupt somebody, to be offended because someone took your idea. When you have successfully not reacted to those things or reacted in the way that's in alignment with what you believe, celebrate that.
I love it.
So that's what
Janet Miller Elwes, thank you so much for being a guest on Speakers Who Get Results. We'll put all the information, how to learn more about her, in our show notes. And this has been Speakers Who Get Results. If you enjoyed this, please tell your friends, subscribe, follow us on Apple Podcasts, leave us a good review on Apple Podcasts, please. And in the meantime, keep coming back. I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.